Good afternoon, everyone. This is Heather Turner from District 53, and we're going to talk about YouTube for Toastmasters clubs. And I know we still have actually quite a few people logging in, so I'm going to stall for a couple of minutes. And I see some familiar faces on, and I also see some people that I think were on our webinar last night from another district. So if you are on from the other district or from another district from the one we gave a webinar yesterday, there is a question bar to the right of your screen. So please say hi and let me know why you're here. Okay. Fantastic. So thank you for attending, and I do appreciate you attending yesterday's webinar and today's webinar, and nice to see you back again. We are going to start, and if people log in late, well, we are recording this, and it will be available on the District 53 website, hopefully by the beginning of this week. If you have questions, there is a chat bar and a question bar to the right of the screen. Please ask the questions as you have them. So today we're obviously going to talk about YouTube since it's right in front of our faces. YouTube is probably one of the best social media channels for Toastmasters to use, and not just Toastmasters, but business in general, because it's so fluid and so easily utilized for so many different things. Now, I would recommend if you are the VP of PR of your club, or even just a regular officer or a regular member, and you're interested in using social media for Toastmasters and maybe for your personal use and business use, there is a fantastic website out there called Social Media Examiner, and you can sign up for their free newsletter. And I think it's about once every day or so they come out with a newsletter in your email. Then it keeps up to date on what's happening in social media. So new channels coming out, new options coming out for each platform. And it also gives you a yearly social media report, which you can download for free. And that's really helpful because there's so much information out there about what's going on in social media, what's hot, what's not, what's kind of faded into, not being used as much anymore, and what is increased in usage, and what particular businesses or nonprofits or clubs, for example, in this case, are using specifics. That's a very great source of information. I highly encourage people to go and sign up for that newsletter. A lot of really good information out there about that. Okay. Now, one of the reasons that I really like YouTube is because it's great for members. It's fantastic for publicity, but it's also fantastic in terms of the fact that you can see what people are doing, whether it's public or private. But if you have members that want to improve themselves, you can also tape them. And it doesn't have to be public. The great thing about YouTube is when you record something and you upload it to YouTube, it can be public, it can be private, or it can be to the administrator's view only. Now, some people don't want their videotape of their speeches to be public, and that's okay. But in order to help themselves become better speakers and presenters, it can be really, really useful to view yourself when you're talking, especially when you're presenting to the club. People tend to get a little bit overcomfortable when they're talking to the same people all the time and they have the same evaluators. And if you think about it, everybody's worst critic is themselves. So I know that when I've taped myself at a club meeting, or I've taped myself when I'm at another speaking engagement, I will pick up on things that an evaluator may not necessarily give me feedback on, maybe because they haven't evaluated me very often, or maybe they're just used to certain mannerisms. So I might see things that I'm doing with my hands, for example, or that I'm tugging an earlobe, for example, or pushing my glasses up, that can be small, irritating mannerisms that a speech evaluator may not necessarily pick up. But if you're speaking to groups of people, they can be distracting, for example. And I used this example yesterday when I was talking about YouTube. For example, I have one pair of earrings that actually catches the light when I move, and on video, it's actually very distracting. And from the audience's perspective, that's one thing that you can see that can be extremely distracting. So I know now when I'm speaking in front of people not to wear those particular earrings, just as an example. Now, you can also use YouTube as a promotional tool. So if you're taping meetings, or if you're taping evaluations, or taping table topics, or taping speeches, you can use those to send those links out to people. I don't know how many people have called me or emailed me that is interested in attending a Toastmasters meeting, and they want to know more about it. And verbally, you can only really describe things so well, and you can talk about the fact that you might have members in your club that joined a few years ago that when they get up and speak in public, you could barely hear them or wouldn't look at the audience, for example. And you can talk about the transition from them becoming a shy, reclusive speaker to someone that's energetic and self-confident. But that's only a verbal description. If you taped, for example, someone's icebreaker, and then you tape their 10th speech or their 20th speech, and you use those as examples of, these are some of the examples of what happens when you come to Toastmasters. This is the transition from that shy person who is not a great speaker yet to a good speaker. When people can actually see and hear those things, you can use this as an advertising medium. And it can also give people a better example of how a club meeting can run. What exactly is table topics? I know that when I've tried to explain table topics to people, sometimes telling people, well, it's impromptu speaking. We talk about, we have the table topics master, and they come up with questions, or they come up with, items that you talk about, and someone comes up and talks off the cuff for 1 to 2 minutes. Sometimes that really doesn't convey what table topics really means, and having a videotape example of that is a great example of actually showing people in person what that really is. Now, Toastmasters on YouTube, there's thousands of Toastmasters on YouTube. What I would recommend is, if your club is going to dive into YouTube, just go to YouTube itself and enter Toastmasters and start looking at club channels. Start looking at Toastmasters videos. What are they doing? How are they customizing their channels? What are they putting out there, for example? So there's clubs that are doing just speeches. There are clubs that are doing full club meetings. There are clubs that are doing speeches, and then they're doing a separate video for the evaluations. There's clubs that are doing a speech and then the evaluations during the same video. So get some ideas of what you think might work for you. We're not recreating the wheel in terms of marketing, but to get a good idea of what's out there and see what appeals to you. Put yourself in the shoes of a potential guest to your club and a potential member to your club, and think back to when you first joined Toastmaster. And if you had seen a Toastmasters video out there, what would have appealed to you? What would have reached out and grabbed you and said, hey, this is really interesting. I want to go attend this meeting because of something that I saw. Now, the great thing about YouTube is, because there's already so much content out there, whether it's Toastmasters related or public speaking related, professional speakers related, you can upload videos to it. But even if you only have a few videos, or you don't have any of your own content, you can do what's creating playlists. And playlists are basically bringing in other people's videos from all over YouTube. You don't have to ask permission of that, but you can say, these are the greatest speakers of, Lance Miller and Craig Valentine, for example. You could create a playlist of the past international champions of public speaking for Toastmasters, for example. You could create a playlist of what you think are the most helpful speaking tips. You can create playlists of all of these different things, and it brings the content into your Toastmasters YouTube channel itself. Now, this is the Toastmasters International website, and when you're looking for content both to bring in and use on a playlist on your own club YouTube channel, or to use for content on other Toastmasters social media channels, this is a great resource to start with. There are lots and lots and lots. I think there's something like 1,000 videos on the Toastmasters International channel that you can use for content to bring into Facebook, to bring into YouTube, to pin to Pinterest, to import into blogs, to send to links for people. If you're just starting out with YouTube, for example, and you wanted to send people some information by email or over the internet about Toastmasters, and you didn't have your own content created yet, you could be sending them video links from the Toastmasters International site, for example. Now, one of the cool things about YouTube is, when you've done a video, you can embed it. So if you have a Free Toast 2 website, or any other type of website that you might be using for your club, you can embed those videos in there. Now, there is another video option out there called Vimeo. Those videos, I do recommend if you're going to have high resolution video, but not to embed those in websites because they take up a lot of bandwidth and they're also huge. In terms of putting Vimeo videos embedded on websites, if you're on a really, really slow connection, for example, I waited about 20 minutes on a slow connection on a Toastmasters club page for their Vimeo video to load up. And on another page, they had a YouTube video and it took about 30 seconds. So there's a big difference in terms of the transition and the feed that comes into the website itself. Now, you can also input videos into blogs, for example, and this is a great way both to kind of publicize your members and also tell external people in terms of advertising what your club is doing. So if you had someone, for example, do a speech, and I'm going to use this as an example again, about the zombie apocalypse, for example, and they had a PowerPoint, and they wanted to put the PowerPoint and the notes on a blog post, but they also wanted to videotape them speaking, they could do that and they could encapsulate that into a blog post itself. And then if somebody was interested in, what kinds of things do you talk about at Toastmasters, for example? Well, here's some of the blog posts of some recent speeches that people have done. One person talked about the zombie apocalypse. Another person talked about paper and plastic recycling. And those videos can be embedded into the blogs themselves. Facebook and Twitter is a great outlet for using YouTube videos. There's a free application called Woobox. It's Woobox, where you can actually bring in your YouTube channel into your Facebook page. It doesn't cost anything to connect. The only thing you have to do is give it permission, and it's a very safe application. I've been using it for many, many years. And basically, you can set a primary video in it, but it will bring in all of the videos that you have created into YouTube as a tab on your Facebook page. And you can also send them into Twitter as well, and not just your own YouTube things. You can use basically any YouTube material and put it into Facebook and feed it into Twitter, pin it to Pinterest. You're not taking that information, you're not taking that content, you're using that with attribution. So you're linking back to the original content. Now, you can pin Pinterest, you can pin your videos to Pinterest. I have not found any Toastmasters Club doing this yet, but it is a great way to get some more eyes on videos. There are a lot of Toastmasters related content on Pinterest. Pinterest is free. It's a great advertising medium for search engine optimization, and it's one more way to leverage YouTube. Now, to talk about search engine optimization for just a minute, is YouTube is probably one of the best mediums out there for Toastmasters clubs getting found on the internet. YouTube is owned by Google. Google loves its own content. So you have to think about the fact that because YouTube loves it, or Google loves its own content, when you put those videos out there on YouTube itself, it will help get your club found, basically. And the other thing to think about is people search within YouTube just like they search in Google. A lot more people actually search within YouTube for things, especially if it's instructional. There's a lot of people actually going to YouTube rather than Google and saying, I need help with public speaking, fear of public speaking. I need to improve my public speaking. There's actually a lot more people searching within YouTube search for those particular topics than Google itself. So using YouTube as an advertising medium for your club is a really great way of being specifically targeted to capturing those people that need help with public speaking. This particular club, for example, Medley Toastmasters, they do all kinds of different segments. So they have table topic session, they have evaluation sessions, they have evaluations on the end of the meeting. So each of the meeting segments is actually broken up into its own video. Again, go out to YouTube and check out some of the Toastmasters videos that are out there. Check out some of the channels that are out there and see what they're doing with it, because there's so much great information out there and there's so many good ideas that people have already done out there. Now, the great thing about YouTube is they have an internal studio. YouTube had an internal studio creator that they've recently changed. Right now it's in beta. You can switch back and forth between the old version and the new version. The new version doesn't have quite as much edit facilities as the old version, but they're actually still rolling out changes to this. But this is an example of our District 53 backend of our social media channel for YouTube itself. And so some of these videos that we have in here, for example, are public, and some of them are unlisted. And the unlisted ones are used for being shared internally within our district. So the YouTube channel can be shared or can be used not just for the club level, but area, division, district level itself. And those can all help the clubs within the district, for example, in this particular case. So we had done division and area officer training. We had done base camp for BPEs, and those were all links that were shared internally by email within our district itself. And the division and area officer training was how to run area and division makeup training that was shared among our district executive committee members. Now, this is kind of a little bit more of the back end of YouTube Studio. If you set up a YouTube channel, which quite literally takes about 2 minutes or less to do, you do need a Google account attached to it. It doesn't have to be Gmail. I do recommend if you're going to set up a Google and YouTube account for your club, set up a Gmail account so that everybody can have access to it, that it's club officers, and it's easily transferable when the next round of officers come through and take over everything. Instead of having to change all of this stuff from your personal accounts, your personal email accounts, it's just easier to share access with that Gmail account to everybody. When you set up the account, you really cannot break this. Poke around in this, take a few minutes to learn the back end of YouTube. When I've showed people the back end of YouTube, it's really taken about 10 minutes for people to kind of go through all of these links on the left-hand side, to click on things and to actually see which each tab does and what the settings for each of them. There's a lot of content in there, but the more often you use it and review it, the more you're going to learn about what's in the back end. And as the Studio Beta rolls out more options, they'll give you some notifications saying, you know, this option is new, for example, this one is being retired. And I think they've retired actually most of the old options in the back end of the Studio, but a lot of the new ones still are coming out in the next 6 months, and some of them are really exciting. And I won't share that until they've rolled out because I don't want to get people too excited about it. Now, this is the back end of the YouTube editor, and this is really helpful because you can add tracks to it, you can add music, you can also trim and splice things. So for example, if you've done a video, for example, of a club meeting and you wanted to trim out the first 2 minutes of maybe someone transitioning from an introduction to an introduction, or someone coming up and you wanted to actually cut part of that out, you could actually clip that out. So the internal editor in here is very, very useful. There's some additional bells and whistles in here. There's also an add blur option, which is fairly new. They did have that within the old YouTube editor, but it's changed because the old editor, you had to specifically put a segment of the video that you were blurring out the full thing. Here you can add a blur to someone's face, for example. Now, when you're doing videos, you really do want to ask permission of club members before you start videotaping. It's a good idea to get permission in writing if you can, and just be cognizant of the fact that, you know, some people may not want to be on videotape, some people don't want their pictures taken, but you do want to have that conversation with people. And if someone does end up on camera by accident, you do have the option of being able to blur their face out. There's also statistics in here, and the statistics are very helpful if you really want to see what is getting eyes on your videos. So they'll give you how much, for each video, they'll give you individual specifics, and they'll give you an overview of the whole channel. And so if you had a video, for example, of someone's first icebreaker, for example, you could get some statistics that said, you know, that speech was 4 to 6 minutes and it was maybe actually 5 minutes and 12 seconds. How many people that watched the video watched the whole thing, or how many people only watched half of it and then maybe went to go do something else? You can see how many people viewed it. You can see likes, dislikes, comments. It'll give you a lot of information both about the individual channel itself, statistics, and the YouTube videos as well. This is also important. Closed captioning is something that we will have to be aware of in the next couple of years. I don't foresee it happening right now, but there's something called ADA compliance and ADA website compliance, which means that any videos, whether they're embedded on a website, or embedded on a blog, or on YouTube itself, will have to include closed captioning, or else someone could be legally liable for that. There has yet to be anybody having a lawsuit held against someone for that, but it is part of ADA compliance online, and it is something that as you add videos, it's something to be aware of. Like if you've written a speech, for example, because you've already written the speech, technically you could add the closed captioning to it right away. That might be helpful to get ahead of the game in terms of that particular thing coming down the road. Now you can also add cards, and cards in YouTube mean you can link to something else. You can link to another channel. You could link to a poll, so you could actually add a poll on your table topics video, for example, that says, how many people thought this was a really neat idea? Or video or playlist. If you wanted to link to something else, for example, you do have to get that approved. That's a little bit more into the expert session of YouTube, which I can certainly do if anybody is interested. And that's fairly easy, but it's a lot of work to get there. But adding cards to it is very easy to do, and they help link to other content that's out there on the web or link to other content within YouTube itself. And this is an example of linking to another YouTuber playlist. So say you had done someone that was doing part 2 of their level 1 in pathways, for example. So they had done their first speech in level 1 where they get an evaluation, and then they did the second speech where they're supposed to use that pretty much same speech and use the improvements that their evaluator suggested. So you would want to perhaps link to that first video of them doing that part 1 of the speech and say, this is part 1 of the speech, this is part 2 of the speech. You could link back and forth to each of them. Now, this is a basic YouTube channel. There's some additional things you can do with this. You have a YouTube header that you can edit. Google Plus is kind of going out the door, so it's not that important. But if you have a Facebook club page, if you have a Twitter account, if you have a website, for example, you can add these as links up at the top right. And you can also customize it. So there's some additional things you can do in YouTube itself. Now, it's very, very important for search engine optimization, both within YouTube itself and within Google, to put in the description of your channel. So you want to put in about your club, where they meet. You want to put in a link to your website if you have one. And you want to put in any information that's pertinent to that. So you might want to say, if you're a club, for example, and maybe you're a open club or a closed club, put that information out there, but also put in some keywords. So if you're afraid of public speaking, we help people to gain more confidence in public speaking. Put some phrases that people would be looking for in searches. So we help people overcome their fear of public speaking. Might be a phrase you might want to use in your description itself. So this is what a video itself looks like. This is the title of it, for example. And this actually is one that we have public. We put the date in here. You may not want to put the date in here, but what will happen is this is something that will get picked up in search, and this description will also get picked up in search. So you won't be able to see the analytics and edit video if you're looking at someone else's video on YouTube, but when you're logged in as an administrator, you can. Now, the thing about YouTube is it's a lot like Facebook, where you can have multiple administrators of the account. It is something that I recommend, but again, I also recommend tying it into a Gmail account or a Google account so that everybody has access to that. The other thing that's very important here is the description. This video URL is something that you're going to use to copy and paste into your other social media channels or into email if you want to send that link out to people. You don't necessarily want to send them the URL that's going to show up in the top of the browser bar. That will generally bring people to the page you're looking for, but this video URL is the shortened one that you're going to want to use primarily. The other thing you want to do is make sure that you have tags in here. Tags are also known as keywords. They're not known as hashtags. It's a completely different thing. And speaking of hashtags, you can put hashtags in your descriptions of YouTube. They have very little value for YouTube specifically, but a hashtag are these things you see a lot on Instagram where you see the number sign and then you see a word. People don't generally search in YouTube for hashtags. Tags themselves, also known as keywords in the back end, are what helps your internal YouTube search engine optimization. So when you put a video up there, you're going to want to put things that are related to the video, for example. So if the video I uploaded was about the zombie apocalypse, I would want to add Toastmasters International, my district, Toastmasters Club, Cromwell Community Toastmasters, which is the club that I did my zombie apocalypse speech at. Toastmasters, I might want to put in public speaking, for example. And I also want to put in zombie apocalypse because that's what the speech is about. And people searching for zombie apocalypse may not necessarily be searching for Toastmasters, but they will then be able to come across that video. The same whether I had put in paper and plastic recycling, for example. So if someone was searching for that, it would also come up in search when people were looking for that. That's kind of drive-by advertising, so people are not specifically looking for Toastmasters, but you never know, you might get a member out of it, or someone else somewhere else in the world looking for something might get a Toastmasters member from it. Now, in order to really leverage your videos, you want to see what the other sort of popular and highly viewed videos out there are using for keywords. And you can't see that publicly. The only place that you can see those keywords is in the back end, or if you're an administrator. Now, if you want to find out what those other big videos are being used for keywords out there, there's kind of a cheat way to get there. So you're going to go to the video itself in YouTube, and you're going to right click somewhere in the blank white space of that page itself. And this pop-up menu is going to come, and you're going to click on View Source. And this is the back end of what the page is written in. So this is HTML. You can't edit this, but you can view it. And if you type in Control F and then type in keywords, it will bring it down to any video that's out there on YouTube, what keywords / tags are being used for that. And if it's something that you want to show up in a relevant search for those, make sure you add some of those keywords to your video. Now, you don't want to do what's called keyword stuffing in YouTube, so I would really suggest probably between 10 and 15 keywords or keyword phrases in there. Instagram is really the only social media channel where you want to do keyword or hashtag stuffing, which is way too many of them. Now, live streaming is something that people may not necessarily be into right away, but it is also an option. And on YouTube, we do have live streaming. So it's YouTube Live or Google Live, depending on which day they seem to want to decide which name they want to call themselves. And YouTube is something that, because it's live, it shows up in a separate section of YouTube. Sort of like Facebook and Twitter Live and Instagram Live have a separate section of those channels that it shows up on. This is something you might want to delve into cautiously, and after you've gotten used to your club, getting used to being videotaped, because there is no do-over. You can delete it, but because it is live, some people don't realize, oh no, I didn't want that on tape. And that does happen. So I would have people get their comfort level ready for that yet before you kind of delved into that one. Now, getting ready for this, and I had a great question on here last night in terms of comfort levels. To get people used to being videotaped, start out small, start out with people having their speeches, just tape just the speeches themselves and maybe the evaluations, and have them set up privately so that people can review them. Once people are used to that video camera, or you're taping it on a cell phone, for example, and cell phones have great video resolution, just have people get used to that. After that, then you can start having it, tape it live. Then you can have people start taping other portions of that meeting. But make sure everybody's okay with this. Make sure everybody's comfortable with it. And if you have certain people that maybe don't want to be in the videotape, just make sure that they're sitting out of the camera's view. That's kind of an easy way for them to not be in there by mistake. Now, I know this is kind of a short one, but this is YouTube. I can go a lot more into depth if people have questions about it. But from when I've given this presentation before, this pretty much covers most of it. I do want to know if anybody has any questions. I know that we have quite a few attendees on, which is fantastic. And I would love to help answer anything that someone has to help. Okay, so one of the questions that I have is it really specific what we name a YouTube video? That is a really fantastic question. And you want to think about it again from the perspective of if someone is searching within YouTube or someone is searching within Google, when you title something and you put your description in there, what about those titles and descriptions are necessarily going to match what people are searching for? So you may not necessarily put it in the title of the video. The title might be, learning better time management for Toastmasters, but you could put in the description, this video is a speech about learning better time management for Toastmasters, and we covered things like, fear of public speaking and how to manage your time and how to manage a time writing your speech, and try to incorporate some of those things that someone would actually be searching for within search itself. Okay, there's a question. What is a blurb? Hi, John. Good to see you on. So a blurb is basically a short couple of sentences or a short paragraph. I tend to say blurb just because everybody in the technology world that I kind of swim in a lot of times says, we want a description and we want a blurb for this. So thank you for catching me out on that kind of probably miscellaneous acronym. I hope that explained it a little bit better. Okay. Now, if you have some questions about YouTube itself, I am more than happy to answer them after the fact. My email is attached to the registration, and that actually goes to me. So if you have some questions after the fact, I'm more than happy to answer them. Oh, and there is a new question that came in. Is there a photo editor or a video editor you suggest outside of the YouTube editor? That's a good question. I know that there's some free ones. There's one that comes with Windows. It's a little bit slow. Unless you have an operating system on Windows that has a lot of memory and a lot of operating capacity, I know that it really slows people's computers down. I know that I don't have a Macintosh. My in-laws do, and I've played with it on there. And I know that they actually have a really good video editor in there called QuickTime. You can buy QuickTime for Windows. It's a little pricey for the full version of that. Those you really actually don't need those. Within the YouTube editor itself, there are some functions, at least with the old editor, that they're transitioning to the new one, so that if there's a camera shake, for example, and you're using a handheld video camera or you're using a handheld cell phone, for example, and your hand is shaking, there's a stabilizer function. It takes about half an hour for it to process for about a half an hour of video. It's kind of anytime you process something on YouTube, it takes about as long as the video took to take. There's also a lightning feature. You can change it into black and white. There's some other options in the back end of the video editor that you can play around with. The neat thing with the video editor, until you actually hit save, it doesn't save it. So you can see what all these different options is, but it won't save it until you actually physically hit save. So I highly encourage people to play around with the back end of the video editor. If you do have some options that I've talked about that you don't see yet, they are available in the classic editor, which it gives you that option to go back to, but they are being rolled out slowly, kind of in increments in the new editor itself. So you don't see them yet, they are coming. So the next question is, I understand blurb. So what is a card that you add? Okay, a card is basically like it's tagging part of the video itself. So if you wanted to, it's mostly used for linking to someone else or linking to another video, for example. So to go back and use my example of linking to a video that was related to that video. So part 1 and part 2 of something, for example. Or if someone was doing, from the legacy program, for example, they were doing a couple of different advanced manuals and they were going out of order. So they were doing technical presentations and then they were doing I'm trying to think of a good one. humorously speaking, for example, and they did humorously speaking and then technical and humorously speaking, but they wanted to link to part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5 of the technical manuals. They could link to those other videos within that video itself. Basically, there's a little notation that'll come up on the video that'll say, hey, do you want to view this speech from the advanced manual technical presentations? If you start looking at regular YouTube videos, you'll start to see some highlighted things on the videos itself. Looper, for example, if you're a movie buff, Looper uses cards a lot to link to other related videos. So that's one of the good ones to kind of look at. And I hope that answered that question. Okay. All right, that looks like it's it for questions for the time being. I hope everybody got a little bit of information from this, and I do hope that people embrace YouTube. It is such a great advertising medium. It is perennial evergreen marketing out there, so once you put a video out there, even 10 years from now, YouTube's still going to be around, and people will still find those videos, and you can use them repeatedly for different marketing things, whether it's on your other social media channels, whether it's on your website, or whether it's just to show people, and to show people how they progress. For me, I find YouTube particularly helpful for that. I know that I've personally used that video feature to improve my own public speaking because, again, everybody's worst critic is themselves. So you can see things that other people may not comment on. And because it's such a free medium and a free platform and it's easy to use, check it out. I would love to see some results of you guys using this at the club level or even using it personally. Please feel free to shoot me your video links if you want some feedback on them. I'd love to see them. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a terrific evening and an absolutely wonderful weekend. And before I go off, we have been recording this, and it will be available on the District 53 website, hopefully by early next week. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.